28-year-old nurse Scarlett Brennan sat abandoned at the altar in her wheelchair, her white dress pristine against worn church pews. The sanctuary held 35 guests who came to witness her wedding, but the groom's chair remained empty. Broderick Ashford had fled 20 minutes ago, his best man delivering whispered excuses about not being ready for this kind of responsibility. Her 71-year-old grandfather Thaddeus stood beside her, his arthritic hands clenched into fists, his weathered face burned with rage he couldn't express. The old Navy corpsman had survived the chaos of Mogadishu in 1993, had pulled wounded Marines from burning vehicles under enemy fire. But watching his granddaughter's public humiliation felt worse than any battlefield wound. The guests murmured among themselves. Some checked their phones. Others shook their heads with barely concealed pity. Scarlett gripped her bouquet-tight stems, bending under the pressure. Her face burned with humiliation as whispers echoed from the back rows. What none of them knew was that Thaddeus would give his last $7,000 the next day to save a dying child. The hospital would fire him, their landlord would evict them, their neighbors would call them fools. But 340 motorcycles were already rolling toward their small Montana town. And when the Hells Angels arrived, nothing would ever be the same. 6 months earlier, Scarlett Brennan had been different. She moved through the hospital corridors with purpose, her nursing shoes squeaking against polished floors as she checked on patients in the ICU. The engagement ring caught fluorescent lights as she adjusted IV drips and monitored vital signs. The diamond represented a future she and Broderick had planned together, a future that seemed certain, inevitable, blessed. The silver medical alert bracelet hadn't existed then. Now it encircled her wrist like a shackle. The engraving read T12 complete, marking the exact location where her spine had snapped during the accident. She touched it unconsciously, remembering the neurologist's clinical explanation of what those words meant. Complete severing of the spinal cord at the 12th thoracic vertebra. No sensation below that point. No movement. No hope of recovery. Thaddeus had raised her alone since she was 9 years old. Her father Garrett had died in Fallujah in 2005, an IED, taking him and 3 other Marines during a routine patrol. Her mother had left 2 months later, unable to handle the grief and the responsibility of a daughter who asked too many questions about heaven and flags and why Daddy wasn't coming home. Thaddeus had stepped in without hesitation. The old corpsman knew about duty, about showing up when everyone else disappeared. He'd taught her to ride a bike in the church parking lot, running beside her with his hand on the seat until she found her balance. Helped with homework at his kitchen table, patient with long division and essay structure. Worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for her nursing school tuition, never complaining about the exhaustion that showed in every line of his face. The day she graduated, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, he'd whispered the words his own father told him a lifetime ago. Brennans don't quit. We show up. We do the work. We help people who can't help themselves. Scarlett had lived by those words her entire life. They'd guided her through nursing school, through difficult patients, through the heartbreak of loss and the joy of healing. She'd believed that showing up was enough, that commitment and compassion could overcome any obstacle. The accident taught her different lessons. The accident happened on a rainy November evening. She was driving home from her shift at the hospital, exhausted after 12 hours in the ICU. A commercial truck ran a red light at the intersection of 5th and Monroe. The impact threw her sedan into a concrete barrier. The world went black. She remembered fragments, the screech of metal, glass shattering, pain that existed beyond description. Then nothing. Just darkness and the distant sound of sirens that seemed to come from underwater. When Scarlett woke 3 days later, her world had fundamentally changed. The good news, Dr. Patterson had explained with practiced gentleness, is that your upper body strength and cognitive function are completely unaffected. You'll need to make adjustments, but many people with your injury level live full, productive lives. Full, productive lives, the phrase echoed in Scarlett's mind during months of physical therapy. Learning to transfer from bed to wheelchair required strength she didn't know she possessed. Relearning how to navigate a world designed for standing people meant constantly calculating angles and distances and accessibility. The titanium wheelchair became an extension of her body after endless hours of practice. She customized it with small details that reflected her personality. Purple spoke guards because purple had always been her favorite color. A medical supply pouch positioned exactly where she could reach it. A cup holder Thaddeus had installed with shaking hands and fierce determination, drilling the holes 3 times before getting the angle right. Broderick had been supportive initially. He visited daily during her hospital stay, bringing flowers and updates about their postponed wedding plans. But Scarlett noticed changes. The way he hesitated before kissing her, as if uncertain whether she could feel it. How his eyes drifted when she discussed adaptive equipment for their future home, clearly uncomfortable with the reality of permanent disability. The careful distance he maintained when friends asked about their relationship status, answering with vague reassurances that convinced no one. She told herself it was adjustment. They both needed time to process this new reality. Give him space. Give him patience. Give him the grace she'd want if their positions were reversed. Thaddeus never changed. The old man sold his truck to pay initial medical bills insurance wouldn't cover. He worked double shifts, mopping hospital floors at 71 years old, his arthritic knees screaming with every movement. When Scarlett's apartment lease ended, he cleared out his storage unit and moved her into his tiny studio. They made it work. Grandfather and granddaughter. Two Brennans refusing to quit. The hospital administration deemed Scarlett a liability 6 weeks after her accident. Too many obstacles, they claimed. Patient safety concerns, insurance implications. She knew the real reason, discomfort with her disability. Fears about insurance costs, the subtle prejudice that equated physical limitations with professional incompetence. Vivian Blackwell, the 54-year-old hospital administrator, had delivered the news with practiced coldness. We have to think about our exposure, Miss Brennan. Your condition creates complications. Your condition, as if paralysis was something shameful, something contagious, something that could be avoided with better choices or stronger willpower. Scarlett had fought to keep her composure as security escorted her from the building, the same building where she'd saved lives, where patients had squeezed her hand and thanked her for her gentle touch during painful procedures, where families had wept in gratitude as she explained treatment plans with patience and clarity, translating medical jargon into hope. None of that mattered now. She was a liability, a complication, your condition. Broderick's proposal to move forward with their wedding had surprised her. She'd expected him to end their relationship, had prepared herself for that conversation during long nights staring at the ceiling. Instead, he suggested a small ceremony, something intimate and practical given their changed circumstances. His phrasing should have warned her. Changed circumstances reduced her injury to a logistical inconvenience rather than a fundamental shift in how the world treated her. But Scarlett had been desperate to prove that her accident hadn't made her less worthy of love, less worthy of the future they'd planned, less worthy of being chosen. The wedding preparations had been modest. Her disability benefits didn't allow for extravagance. Thaddeus's Social Security check and part-time hospital wages barely covered their studio apartment rent and medical supplies. The wedding dress was borrowed from a cousin, altered to accommodate her seated position. The white roses in her bouquet were Thaddeus's choice, flowers that reminded him of his late wife Evelyn and the strength she'd shown during her final battle with cancer. The church sat on the edge of town, a simple white building with a cross silhouetted against gray November skies. 35 guests filled the first 6 pews. Most were Scarlett's nursing school classmates and neighbors from the apartment complex. Broderick's family occupied the right side of the sanctuary, their expensive suits and designer dresses standing in stark contrast to the working-class crowd on Scarlett's side. Thaddeus wore his only suit, 40 years old, purchased for his wife's funeral. The shoulders were tight now, straining against muscle built from decades of manual labor. He'd polished his shoes 3 times that morning, buffing away scuffs until the leather gleamed. His hands trembled as he helped Scarlett with the final touches on her dress. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he whispered. "Just like your grandmother on our wedding day." Scarlett smiled, but her eyes held uncertainty. The past week had been filled with silences and excuses. Broderick had been distant all week. Phone calls went unreturned. Text messages received one-word replies. When she tried to discuss honeymoon plans, he'd changed the subject to work deadlines and family obligations. Red flags Scarlett desperately wanted to ignore. Senator Donovan Ashford arrived 15 minutes late. Broderick's father swept into the church with an entourage of aides and security personnel. His presence commanded attention. Power radiated from every gesture, every carefully modulated word. He took his seat in the front pew without acknowledging Scarlett or Thaddeus. His phone buzzed throughout the ceremony preparations. Important calls, presumably. More important than his son's wedding to a woman in a wheelchair. Broderick's mother, Patricia Ashford, offered Scarlett a thin smile that never reached her eyes. "This is quaint," she said, surveying the modest church with barely concealed disdain. Her gaze lingered on the simple flower arrangements, the borrowed decorations, the guests in their department store clothing. Vivian Blackwell sat 3 rows back, her presence like a dark omen. The hospital administrator who'd fired Scarlett shouldn't have been there. Broderick must have invited her. Some misguided attempt at professional networking, using his wedding for career advancement. Vivian caught Scarlett's eye and smiled. The expression held no warmth, only satisfied cruelty. Thaddeus noticed everything. The old corpsman had learned to read people during his military service. Combat taught you to recognize threats before they became lethal. The senator's contempt, Patricia's disdain, Vivian's malicious pleasure. Every instinct screamed danger, but Thaddeus kept silent. This was Scarlett's day, her choice. He would support her no matter what doubts gnawed at his gut. The ceremony was supposed to start at 2 o'clock. 2:15 passed. Then 2:30, whispers rippled through the congregation. Where was the groom? Had anyone seen Broderick? The best man, a young lawyer named Connor, kept checking his phone with growing agitation. He disappeared into the back hallway twice, returning with increasingly worried expressions. Scarlett sat at the altar in her wheelchair, bouquet held carefully in both hands. She could feel the stares, the pity, the judgment. Some guests tried to be subtle, glancing away when she looked their direction. Others watched openly, witnessing her humiliation with the fascination people reserve for car accidents and public meltdowns. Pastor Mitchell, who'd known Scarlett since childhood, approached with gentle concern. Perhaps we should wait in the vestry. Give Broderick a few more minutes. But Scarlett shook her head. She would not hide. Would not let these people see her retreat in shame before understanding what was happening. Thaddeus stood beside her wheelchair, one weathered hand resting on her shoulder. Silent support, unconditional presence. At 2:45, Connor finally approached the altar. His face was pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the church's cool temperature. He leaned down to whisper in Scarlett's ear, but Thaddeus heard every word. Scarlett, I'm so sorry. Broderick, he's gone. He left through the bathroom window. He said he can't do this. He's not ready for this kind of responsibility. The words hit like physical blows. Scarlett's face went white, then flushed with humiliation. Tears welled but didn't fall. She'd learned to control her emotions during months of physical therapy, during countless moments when strangers stared at her wheelchair with pity or disgust. But this was different. This was public devastation. Witnessed abandonment. The congregation erupted in whispers. Phones emerged from purses and pockets. Cameras pointed at Scarlett's frozen face. Someone in the back rows laughed. Actually laughed at her pain. Social media posts were already being drafted. Gossip texts flying to friends who hadn't attended. Did you hear? He actually left her at the altar? I mean, can you blame him? Who wants to deal with that for the rest of their life? Poor thing, she should have known this would happen. Thaddeus's vision tunneled. Rage flooded his system, hot and familiar. The same fury he'd felt watching Marines die in Mogadishu, watching his son's flag-draped coffin lowered into Montana soil, watching his wife waste away from cancer while insurance companies delayed treatment approvals. But this was worse. This was his granddaughter, his Scarlett, the girl he'd raised, the woman who'd overcome paralysis with grace and determination. And some coward had just destroyed her in front of 35 witnesses. Everyone out, Thaddeus said quietly. His voice cut through the whispers like a blade. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The old man's face was granite. His eyes held something dangerous. Something that made people remember he'd been a combat medic, that he'd seen things, done things, survived things that would break softer men. I said everyone out now. The congregation scrambled toward exits. Only Senator Ashford remained seated, phone pressed to his ear, conducting business as his son's wedding imploded. Thaddeus ignored him, ignored everyone. He knelt beside Scarlett's wheelchair and took her hands. Where is he? Thaddeus asked quietly. Connor stammered. I don't know. He just said he couldn't. Where is he? The best man broke. Parking lot, his car. Thaddeus stood. Every joint protested. 71 years of hard living and harder work had taken their toll. But rage was an excellent anesthetic. He walked down the aisle with measured steps. Military precision. A man moving toward a target. Broderick Ashford sat in his BMW engine, running phone in his trembling hands. He'd parked in the far corner of the church lot as if distance could protect him from what he'd just done, from who he'd just abandoned. He didn't hear Thaddeus approach until the old man's fist slammed against the driver's window. Broderick jumped, phone clattering to the floorboard. Thaddeus yanked the car door open with strength that surprised them both. He grabbed Broderick's expensive suit jacket and hauled the younger man from the vehicle. Broderick stumbled, catching himself against the car's roof. Look at her, Thaddeus growled. Go back in there and look at what you did. I can't, Broderick said, a voice breaking. I can't do this forever. She'll need constant help. My career, my father's expectations. Your career. Thaddeus's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. Your father's expectations. You don't understand. The responsibility, every day for the rest of my life. I'm 29 years old. I'm supposed to be building my career, traveling, figuring out who I am. Not spending every morning helping someone get dressed. Not canceling plans because curb cuts aren't available. Not explaining to everyone why my wife is in a wheelchair. Thaddeus's hand moved to Broderick's throat. Not squeezing, not yet, just resting there with the promise of violence. My granddaughter saved lives, Thaddeus said. She pulled people back from death. She dedicated her life to helping others. And you abandoned her at the altar because she needs help getting dressed in the morning. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're a coward. Church security appeared, two young men who'd been hired for the wedding. They moved toward Thaddeus with uncertain steps. The old man's reputation in town was spotless. 18 years working at the hospital. Raised his granddaughter alone, never caused trouble. But something in his eyes now made them hesitate. Sir, one security guard said carefully. Maybe we should all calm down. Senator Ashford's voice boomed across the parking lot. Touch my son, again, old man, and I'll destroy you. The senator strode toward them, flanked by his aides. His face was flushed with anger that had nothing to do with concern for Broderick's well-being and everything to do with public embarrassment. And Ashford humiliated in a small Montana church. Unacceptable. Someone would pay. Thaddeus released Broderick and turned to face the senator. Your son just destroyed my granddaughter in front of 35 people, Thaddeus said evenly. He deserves more than words. What he deserves, Senator Ashford said coldly, is freedom from a lifetime burden he never asked for. Scarlett's condition creates complications that my son shouldn't have to manage. He has a future, a career, a life that shouldn't be derailed by someone else's misfortune. Scarlett's condition. The same words Vivian Blackwell had used when firing her. The same clinical distance that reduced a human being to a medical diagnosis. A complication to be managed or avoided. Thaddeus took a step toward the senator. Security guards moved between them, but Thaddeus's focus never wavered. He'd faced down enemy combatants in Mogadishu, carried wounded men through streets where every window held potential death. This politician, with his expensive suit and empty threats, was nothing. You stay away from my family, Thaddeus said quietly. Both of you. Senator Ashford smiled. The expression held no humor. Old man, I own half this town, including the building where you and Scarlett rent that sad little studio apartment. I sit on the hospital board where you mop floors for minimum wage. You have no idea how easy it would be to make your life very, very difficult. The threat was clear, explicit, undeniable. Thaddeus held the senator's gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked back toward the church. His hands shook with rage he couldn't express. Violence would only prove them right, would give them ammunition. He'd survived too much to throw his life away on people who weren't worth the consequences. Scarlett sat where he'd left her, alone at the altar, white dress like a ghost's, tears finally falling down her cheeks. The sanctuary was empty now. Even Pastor Mitchell had retreated to give her privacy. Thaddeus wheeled her down the aisle in silence. What words could possibly help? What comfort could erase public humiliation? Outside, November rain had started falling, cold drops that mixed with Scarlett's tears as Thaddeus loaded her wheelchair into the borrowed car. They drove home in silence, past familiar streets, past the hospital where they'd both once worked, past the life they'd built together now crumbling under the weight of other people's cruelty. Monday morning arrived with bureaucratic efficiency. Thaddeus reported for his shift at Montana General Hospital at 6 a.m., just as he had for 18 years. He clocked in, retrieved his cleaning cart from the supply closet, and began his rounds on the third floor. The work was mindless, therapeutic. Mop floors, empty trash, replace paper towels, tasks that let his mind wander while his body moved through familiar routines. At 7:30, his supervisor appeared. Thaddeus, Mrs. Blackwell wants to see you in her office. The walk to administration felt like a funeral march. Thaddeus knew what was coming. Senator Ashford's threat hadn't been empty. The old man had lived long enough to recognize when power moved against him. Rich men didn't make idle promises. Vivian Blackwell sat behind her desk, perfectly composed, not a hair out of place, makeup expertly applied, the picture of professional competence. Mr. Brennan, I'm afraid we have to let you go. No preamble, no false sympathy, just cold efficiency. On what grounds? Thaddeus asked calmly. Violent incident on church property Saturday. You assaulted Broderick Ashford in front of witnesses. I grabbed his jacket. I didn't assault anyone. Senator Ashford has provided security footage that tells a different story. He's also filed a formal complaint. Given your age and the nature of the allegations, we feel it's best to terminate your employment immediately. 18 years, Thaddeus said quietly. 0 incidents, 0 complaints. Perfect attendance. Commendations from 3 different department heads. Times change, Mr. Brennan. So do priorities. Vivian slid termination paperwork across her desk. The senator's influence was evident in every precisely worded clause. No severance package. Healthcare terminated immediately. Pension contributions frozen. 18 years of service erased as if he'd never existed. Security escorted him from the building. The same security guard who'd worked alongside Thaddeus for 5 years wouldn't meet his eyes. Orders were orders. Politics was politics. The old man understood. He'd followed orders that made his stomach turn during his military service. Following orders didn't make you evil, just made you complicit. Scarlett was waiting when he returned to their studio apartment. She'd been crying. The apartment was too small to hide emotional devastation. Evidence of her grief was everywhere. Crumpled tissues, the wedding dress thrown over a chair, her engagement ring on the kitchen counter diamond, catching afternoon light like a shard of broken promises. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa," she whispered. Thaddeus sat beside her wheelchair and took her hands. "Never apologize for what cowards do," he said firmly. But they both knew the truth. This was just the beginning. Tuesday brought an eviction notice. The landlord delivered it personally, clearly uncomfortable with his task. The building was owned by Ashford Properties, a subsidiary of the senator's real estate empire. 30 days to vacate, no explanation required. Montana was an at-will rental state. Landlords could terminate month-to-month leases for any reason or no reason at all. Thaddeus studied the notice with tired eyes. The timing was deliberate, calculated, designed to maximize suffering. "Where will we go?" Scarlett asked. "I'll figure something out." But options were limited. Thaddeus's savings had been depleted by Scarlett's medical expenses. His Social Security check then was $847 a month. Without his hospital income, they couldn't afford first and last month's rent anywhere in town. Homeless shelters existed, but none were wheelchair accessible. Friends and neighbors had their own problems. The Brennans were alone. Wednesday, their health care was terminated. Scarlett's medical supplies cost $400 monthly. Catheters, gloves, medical tape, antibacterial supplies. Insurance had covered 70%. Now they'd cover nothing. Thaddeus stood in the pharmacy staring at price tags that might as well have been prison sentences. Thursday morning brought the final blow. Mrs. Eleanor Sutherland lived 2 doors down from their apartment. A widow in her late 60s raising her 6-year-old grandson after her daughter died in a car accident. Thaddeus had helped her with groceries countless times, fixed her leaking sink, shoveled her walkway during winter storms. Small kindnesses neighbors exchanged without keeping score. At 9 a.m., Eleanor burst from her apartment screaming, "Someone help! Please, my grandson!" Thaddeus was outside immediately. So was Scarlett, wheeling herself through their doorway with practiced speed. Eleanor was hysterical, barely coherent. Her grandson Lucas lay on their living room floor unconscious. High fever, rigid neck, petechial rash spreading across his skin. Scarlett recognized the symptoms instantly. "Bacterial meningitis. Call 911 now." The ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics loaded Lucas onto a stretcher and raced toward Montana General Hospital. Eleanor rode with them, clutching her grandson's small hand. Thaddeus and Scarlett followed in a neighbor's car, the old Ford rattling over potholes as they pushed speed limits. The emergency room was chaos. Lucas was rushed into intensive care. Doctors and nurses moved with controlled urgency, Scarlett recognized from her own time working ICU. Bacterial meningitis was a race against time. Minutes mattered. Treatment delays could mean death or permanent disability. Eleanor emerged from the consultation room an hour later, face destroyed by tears. "They need a $7,000 deposit," she said numbly. "For ICU admission. I don't have it. I barely make rent. My insurance won't approve coverage until they process paperwork. That could take days, they said. They said without immediate treatment." She couldn't finish the sentence. Scarlett's hand found Thaddeus's. She knew what he was thinking, knew what he was about to do, the same thing he'd always done when someone needed help and couldn't help themselves. The same thing that made him Thaddeus Brennan, Navy corpsman, grandfather, the kind of man who showed up when everyone else disappeared. "I'll be right back," Thaddeus said quietly. He walked to the hospital parking lot, sat in the borrowed car, pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside was $7,300. His wife Evelyn's life insurance payout, the money he'd been saving for Scarlett's medical equipment, the custom wheelchair she needed, the adaptive computer setup that would let her work from home, the bathroom modifications that would give her independence. Every dollar represented sacrifice. Planning. Hope for a future where Scarlett could thrive despite her paralysis. Thaddeus stared at the envelope for exactly 30 seconds. Thought about Scarlett, thought about Evelyn, thought about what kind of man he wanted to be when everything else was stripped away. Then he walked back inside and handed it to Eleanor Sutherland. "For Lucas," he said simply. Eleanor's hands shook as she took the money. "I can't. This is too much. I'll pay you back. Just take care of your grandson." Scarlett was waiting by the entrance. She'd watched the entire exchange through the glass doors. Tears streamed down her face. Not from sadness, from pride and grief and love for a man who would give everything to save a child he barely knew. A man who embodied principles most people claimed but few practiced. "Grandpa, that was for my equipment," she whispered. "Equipment can wait. That boy can't. But we have nothing now. No job, no savings. How will we—" Thaddeus cupped her face with weathered hands. "Brennans don't quit, sweetheart. We'll figure it out. We always do." Lucas Sutherland would survive. The doctors would later confirm that Thaddeus's $7,000 bought the ICU admission that saved the boy's life. Without immediate treatment, bacterial meningitis would have killed him within hours, or left him with catastrophic brain damage. One life saved, one family whole, one old man with nothing left but his granddaughter and his principles. Friday evening, Thaddeus packed their belongings into garbage bags. Everything they owned fit into 8 bags. Clothes, photographs, his wife's jewelry box, Scarlett's nursing textbooks, his Bronze Star from Mogadishu in a wooden box, a lifetime compressed into plastic and desperation. The eviction deadline was Saturday morning, 12 hours to find somewhere to go, 12 hours to salvage dignity from complete devastation. Neighbors watched from windows and doorways. Some faces showed sympathy, others satisfaction. Mrs. Brennan from the first floor shook her head with practiced judgment. "Foolish old man, giving away money like that when they're being evicted. Some people never learn." Her voice carried through the apartment complex parking lot. Meant to be heard, meant to wound. Thaddeus ignored her, focused on the work. Load garbage bags into the borrowed car. Make sure Scarlett had her medical supplies. Check that her wheelchair was secure. Practical tasks that kept despair at manageable levels. Vivienne Blackwell drove past at 6 p.m. Her luxury sedan slowed as it passed the apartment complex. She looked directly at Thaddeus loading garbage bags, smiled and waved. The gesture was mockery, pure malicious pleasure at watching an old man humiliated. Proof that Senator Ashford's promises had been kept. The old man and his disabled granddaughter were being crushed exactly as threatened. Thaddeus's hands clenched, then relaxed. Violence wouldn't help, rage wouldn't solve anything. He returned to packing. Scarlett sat in her wheelchair on the sidewalk, silent tears falling. She'd stopped trying to help, stopped suggesting solutions. There were no solutions, no family to call, no friends with space for a 71-year-old man and his paralyzed granddaughter. No shelters equipped for wheelchairs. No money for deposits or first month's rent. They were out of options. As sunset painted Montana skies orange and purple, Thaddeus sat beside Scarlett's wheelchair on the curb. 8 garbage bags contained their entire world. A borrowed car, their only transportation. $17 in his wallet. Social Security check, not due for another week. "Where will we sleep tonight, Grandpa?" Scarlett asked quietly. "The church might let us use their basement, just for a few nights until I figure something out." "And then what?" Thaddeus had no answer. For the first time in his 71 years, he'd run out of solutions, out of strength, out of hope. Mogadishu hadn't broken him. His son's death hadn't broken him. His wife's cancer hadn't broken him. But watching his granddaughter's future destroyed by cowards and bureaucrats had finally found the limits of his endurance. "I'm so sorry, Scarlett," he whispered. She took his weathered hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. You're the only person who never gave up on me." They sat in silence as darkness fell. Neighbors returned to their apartments. Lights winked on in windows. Families gathering for dinner. Children laughing. Normal lives continuing while the Brennans faced homelessness on a cold November evening. The temperature dropped as night deepened. Thaddeus was reaching for his jacket when he heard it. Distant, barely audible, a low rumble like thunder. But the sky was clear. No storm clouds, no weather that would explain the sound growing steadily louder. The rumble became a growl. The growl became a roar. Scarlett looked up. Is that motorcycles? The sound grew until it overwhelmed everything else. Engines, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The bass vibration rattled windows, set off car alarms. Neighbors emerged from apartments, confused and frightened. The noise approached from the east from the highway leading into town. Then they appeared on the horizon. Headlights, hundreds of them, arranged in perfect V formation. Chrome-catching streetlights, leather and steel and American flags. The motorcycles filled the street leading to the apartment complex, their engines synchronized like military aircraft. 340 Harley Davidsons. They rolled into the parking lot with parade precision, forming concentric circles around where Thaddeus and Scarlett sat on the curb. The engines cut simultaneously. Perfect silence fell like a curtain. 340 riders dismounted, leather jackets, patches, beards and scars and faces marked by hard living. Some wore military insignias, Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, unit patches from Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia and Desert Storm. These weren't criminals. These were warriors. An older man walked through the ranks, tall, silver beard, face lined by 69 years of living and fighting and surviving. His leather jacket bore patches from the Battle of Mogadishu, Marine Corps insignia, Hell's Angels colors. The name on his vest read Rourke. He stopped 3 feet from Scarlett's wheelchair. His eyes met hers, then Thaddeus's. Recognition and memory and promises made 3 decades ago in African streets while bullets flew and young men died. Colton Cole Rourke had found his corpsman. Miss Brennan, Cole said, his voice carrying across the silent parking lot. Your grandfather saved my life 30 years ago. We heard what happened. We're here to fix it. Thaddeus stared at the patches on the man's jacket. Mogadishu, Marine Force Recon. The face was older, weathered by 30 years, but recognition hit like a physical blow. Rourke Lance Corporal Rourke. Colonel now, retired. But yeah, Doc, it's really me. 340 motorcycles, 340 warriors, 340 people who understood that some debts transcend time and distance and the limitations of normal civilian life. The Hell's Angels had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The silence after 340 engines cut was absolute. Neighbors stood frozen in doorways and windows, phones pressed to their ears calling 911. Children peeked from behind their parents' legs. Mrs. Brennan from the first floor had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with something between terror and fascination. The apartment complex parking lot had transformed into something from a movie, leather and chrome and steel. American flags rippling in the evening breeze, POWMIA banners, Marine Corps emblems, Navy anchors, Army stars. These weren't the criminal bikers from news reports and television dramas. These were warriors who'd traded military uniforms for leather jackets, but never stopped serving. Colton Rourke stood before Scarlett's wheelchair with the bearing of a man who'd commanded Marines in combat. 6'3", shoulders broad despite 69 years, silver beard neatly trimmed, eyes that had seen death and destruction but still held capacity for kindness. His leather jacket bore patches that told stories. Battle of Mogadishu 1993, Marine Force Recon, Purple Heart, Bronze Star with Valor device. Behind him, 339 other riders stood in formation, silent, disciplined, waiting. Scarlett looked up at Cole with confusion and wonder warring on her face. She'd never met this man, had no idea why hundreds of motorcycles had surrounded her grandfather's eviction. But something in Cole's expression suggested this moment had been inevitable. That forces set in motion 30 years ago had finally converged on this Montana parking lot. I don't understand, Scarlett said quietly. Cole knelt beside her wheelchair. The movement was practiced, respectful. He'd clearly spent time around people with disabilities, knew how to meet someone at eye level without making it condescending. His weathered hands rested on his knees as he looked directly into Scarlett's eyes. Mogadishu, October 1993, Cole said. I was a 38-year-old Marine Scout sniper. Already had 2 tours under my belt. Should have known better. Got separated from my unit during the battle. Somali militia hit me twice. Once in the leg, once in the shoulder. I was bleeding out in the street when your grandfather found me. Thaddeus's face had gone pale. Memories he'd buried for 3 decades were surfacing like corpses from deep water. Somalia, the chaos, the screaming. Young men dying in African streets while politicians back home debated mission parameters and exit strategies. I didn't know your name at first, Thaddeus said hoarsely. You were just another wounded Marine. You knew my name, Doc. You kept saying it while you worked on me. Stay with me, Rourke. Marines don't quit. Stay with me. Cole stood and turned to address the crowd of neighbors gathering at safe distances. His voice carried the command authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. This man, Cole gestured to Thaddeus, dragged me 200 yards under enemy fire, applied tourniquets to both wounds, kept me conscious by talking about his wife and his son, told me about Montana, about raising his boy to be a good man, about teaching him that showing up was 90% of life. Police sirens approached from the east. 2 Montana State Patrol cruisers and 3 local police cars converged on the apartment complex. Officers emerged with hands on holstered weapons assessing the situation. Hundreds of bikers, scared civilians, potential for violence. Then one of the officers, a grizzled sergeant in his late 50s, saw the patches on Cole's jacket. Jesus Christ, the sergeant breathed. Mogadishu, Cole turned slowly. Sergeant Davis, Colonel Rourke, sir, the sergeant snapped to attention. Sergeant Rick Davis, 2nd Battalion, 10th Mountain Division. We pulled security during the extraction. I remember you, sir. You were unconscious on the medevac chopper. The tension dissolved like morning mist. Other police officers recognized military insignia on leather jackets. Purple Hearts, combat infantry badges, Navy Cross medals. These weren't criminals. These were veterans. Brothers in arms. The police sergeant radioed dispatch that the situation was under control. No threat, just bikers visiting a friend. Cole returned his attention to Scarlett. We rode 800 miles in 14 hours when we heard what happened to you, he said. Heard about the wedding. About your grandfather getting fired. About the eviction. We have people everywhere, Miss Brennan. Veterans who remember what it means to leave no one behind. I still don't understand why. Because your grandfather taught me that you show up for people who can't help themselves. He showed up for me in Mogadishu. Showed up for you after your father died. Showed up for Eleanor Sutherland's grandson yesterday when he gave away his last dollar. Cole's voice hardened. And the people who tried to destroy him are about to learn what happens when you hurt someone under our protection. Thaddeus found his voice. Cole, you didn't have to. Doc, with respect, shut up and let us work. The memory hit Thaddeus with visceral force. October 3rd, 1993, Mogadishu, Somalia, Operation Gothic Serpent. What was supposed to be a simple snatch and grab had devolved into an 18-hour battle that would later be called Black Hawk Down. Thaddeus was 40 years old. Navy Hospital Corpsman First Class, attached to a Marine security element providing perimeter support. He'd served in the Gulf War in 1991, thought he'd seen combat. Desert Storm had been quick. Mechanical, high-tech warfare that ended before most Americans finished their morning coffee. Somalia was different. Urban warfare. Close quarters. Enemies who didn't wear uniforms or follow rules of engagement. The helicopter crash changed everything. Suddenly, highly trained special operations soldiers were scattered across hostile city blocks. Militia fighters swarmed from every direction. RPG fire. Automatic weapons. The kind of chaos that separated professionals from everyone else. Thaddeus had been moving between wounded when he heard the call. Horman sniper down. We need a corpsman. He'd run toward the sound. Stupid. Reckless. The intersection was exposed. 3 directions offered militia fighters clear lines of fire. But corpsmen didn't calculate odds. They responded. Marine soldiers, sailors were dying, and corpsmen went. That was the contract. The sacred duty that transcended rank and service branch and survival instinct. Lance Corporal Colton Rourke had been lying in an alley intersection. 2 gunshot wounds, left thigh femoral artery compromised, right shoulder through and through, but bleeding heavily. The Marine's face was gray despite his experience and training, shock setting in. Minutes from death if someone didn't intervene. Thaddeus had dropped beside him without thinking. Tourniquets first. Stop the bleeding. The femoral wound was catastrophic, blood pumping with each heartbeat. Thaddeus's hands moved with practiced speed, his mind cataloging injuries, while his voice kept up a steady stream of words. Corpsmen learned early that talking kept patients conscious, kept them fighting. What's your name, Marine R. Rourke? Lance Corporal Colton Rourke. Well, Lance Corporal Rourke, you're not dying today. I'm Doc Brennan, Navy Corpsman, and I don't lose patience. Bullets had snapped overhead. RPG explosions shook the ground. Thaddeus ignored everything except the wounded man before him. Tourniquet on the thigh pulled tight until the bleeding slowed. Pressure bandage on the shoulder. IV lines started despite shaking hands. Morphine to manage pain and shock. Got a family, Rourke. Sister, nephew, he's 3. Wants to be a Marine like Uncle Cole. Then you're getting home to see him. Marines don't quit. Say it. Marines don't quit. Again. Marines don't quit, Doc. The tourniquet had saved Rourke's life, but they still needed extraction. Thaddeus had dragged Cole 200 yards to the casualty collection point, 200 yards through intersections where Somali militia fired from windows and rooftops, 200 yards while carrying a man who outweighed him by 40 pounds. Adrenaline and duty and stubborn refusal to let another young man die. At one point, an RPG had hit the building 10 feet to their left. The explosion threw debris across the street. Shrapnel cut Thaddeus's arm, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Cole was fading in and out of consciousness. Losing him meant failure, meant breaking the promise every corpsman made. Stay with me, Rourke. Talk to me about your nephew. What's his name? Marcus, named him after my father. Tell me about Marcus. Smart kid, wants to be a Marine. I told him Uncle Cole would come home and teach him. You're going to teach him, Lance Corporal. Stay with me. The medevac helicopter had taken Cole away. Thaddeus never learned if the Marines survived. The battle continued, more wounded, more dying. 18 hours of hell that ended with American withdrawal and political recrimination and funerals for 19 soldiers who trusted their government to support them. Thaddeus had received a Bronze Star for his actions that day. The medal sat in a box somewhere in the garbage bags now piled beside the curb. He'd never worn it, never displayed it. Medals felt obscene when better men died. But apparently Cole had remembered, had spent 30 years looking for the corpsman who'd saved his life. I tried to find you, Cole said quietly, pulling Thaddeus back to the present. Took me 5 years. Navy personnel records are classified. Transferred units. No forwarding address in the system. But I never forgot your face, your voice, the way you kept telling me about your son Garrett and how he was going to be a good man. Thaddeus's eyes filled with tears. Garrett died in Fallujah, 2005. IED. Cole's expression cracked. I know, Doc. I know. That's part of why we're here. One of the bikers stepped forward, carrying a folding table and projector. Within minutes, they'd set up a makeshift presentation area in the parking lot. Neighbors who'd been hiding ventured closer, curiosity overcoming fear. The police sergeant helped direct traffic, ensuring civilians stayed safe while getting clear views. A woman in her mid-40s wearing a leather jacket over business casual clothing stepped to the front. Her patches identified her as the Foundation's legal director, former Army JAG officer, Rhodes Scholar, someone who'd traded military law for veteran advocacy. My name is Colonel Amanda Wright, retired, she said. Her voice carried authority without aggression. I'm the legal director for Warriors Legacy Foundation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization established in 2000. Our mission is simple. We find good people destroyed by bad systems, and we fix the destruction. The projector flickered to life. Statistics appeared on the white sheet they had hung from the apartment building wall. Numbers that told stories of desperation and salvation. Warriors Legacy Foundation, 24 years of service, 8 million in aid distributed, 600 families helped, 580 veterans, housed 280 homes saved from foreclosure, 210 college scholarships awarded. We started, Colonel Wright continued, because our president's daughter died of leukemia at age 7. Insurance denied coverage. Treatment cost $400,000. By the time Cole and his wife sold their house, their cars, everything they owned, it was too late. His daughter died while insurance executives debated cost-benefit ratios. Cole's face remained impassive, but pain flickered in his eyes. That's when Cole made a promise. He swore that no good person would ever suffer alone again. Not while he was breathing. Not while his brothers and sisters in the veteran community could help. So we built something, a network of warriors who remember what service means. The projector cycled through photographs, families in new homes, veterans receiving prosthetics, children on college campuses, elderly couples keeping houses they'd lived in for 50 years. Each image represented a life salvaged from the wreckage of American healthcare and economic systems that chewed up vulnerable people and spit out statistics. We're funded, Wright said, entirely by veterans and veteran-owned businesses. Zero government money, zero corporate donors. Just people who served, who understand sacrifice, who refuse to let brothers and sisters fall through the cracks. Mrs. Sutherland emerged from the crowd. She was crying. Lucas, her 6-year-old grandson, held her hand. The boy who'd been dying of bacterial meningitis 24 hours ago now looked healthy, alert, alive because Thaddeus had given $7,000 he couldn't afford to lose. Miss Brennan, Eleanor Sutherland said, her voice breaking. Scarlett, I need to tell you something. Scarlett turned her wheelchair to face the older woman. The money your grandfather gave me yesterday, Eleanor continued. I didn't know where it came from. Didn't know it was his last dollar, but I called the hospital billing department this morning to set up payments. They told me something strange. They said my grandson's entire bill was paid. All of it. $73,000 for ICU care. Eleanor looked at Cole. You did that. The foundation did that, Cole corrected. When we heard what Thaddeus did giving his last $7,000 to save your grandson, we paid the rest. Lucas's treatment is covered. You owe nothing. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The emotional dam broke. Mr. Whitmore stepped forward next. He was a veteran himself. Army Infantry Desert Storm era. He'd lived in the apartment complex for 12 years. Kept to himself mostly. Thaddeus had helped him carry groceries a few times. They'd shared brief conversations about the weather and the declining state of the world. Nothing deep, nothing that suggested connection. I owe you an apology, Whitmore said to Thaddeus. A big one. For what? 2 years ago, my wife needed dialysis. Kidney failure. Our insurance covered 70%, but the co-pays were $22,000 a year. We were going bankrupt. I was going to pull her off treatment. Let her die because we couldn't afford to keep her alive. Whitmore's voice shook. Someone paid the bills, all of them. Anonymous donor the dialysis center said, 2 years of treatment, $44,000. I had no idea it was this foundation. No idea you were connected to the people who saved my wife's life. He turned to the gathered neighbors, and I watched them pack garbage bags tonight. Watched them get evicted, didn't say a word, didn't help, didn't even ask if they needed anything. Shame twisted Whitmore's weathered face. I'm sorry, he said directly to Thaddeus and Scarlett. You saved my wife, and I repaid you by doing nothing when you needed help. A younger woman pushed through the crowd. 38 years old, 2 small children clinging to her legs. She looked familiar, but Scarlett couldn't place her immediately. Then recognition hit. The woman had lived in the complex 3 years ago. Scarlett had helped her once with a medical question about her twins. My babies were born at 26 weeks, the woman said. Premature, they spent 3 months in NICU. The bills were $80,000. My insurance capped at $50,000. I was facing bankruptcy, losing my apartment, losing everything. She looked at Cole. Warriors Legacy Foundation paid the difference, $30,000. Kept my family whole, and I moved away without ever knowing who helped us. Without saying thank you. She turned to Scarlett. You answered my questions when I was scared, explained what the doctors meant, held my hand in the hospital hallway. And tonight I drove past here on my way home from work, saw the eviction, saw you sitting on that curb, and I almost kept driving, almost pretended I didn't see. Tears streamed down her face. Thank you for helping my babies. I'm sorry I almost abandoned you. The confessions continued, each one adding weight to the moment. An elderly widow stepped forward trembling. House fire 18 months ago. Everything gone. No insurance because I couldn't afford it on Social Security. Warriors Legacy Foundation rebuilt my home. $17,000 in construction costs. I didn't know who to thank. Didn't know it was connected to you, Thaddeus. A veteran missing his left leg moved to the front. Afghanistan IED 2011. VA waitlist for prosthetics stretched 3 years. 3 years waiting to walk. The foundation paid for immediate fitting. Medical care. Job placement. $28,000 total. I can walk, I can work, I can live because of these people. A young single mother, barely 25. 3 children. Eviction notice when I lost my job. The foundation paid rent for 6 months while I completed medical assistant training, found me employment, gave my family stability when I thought we'd end up on the street. A middle-aged man with burn scars on his hands. Kitchen fire at my restaurant. Lost everything. Insurance company fought the claim. Foundation paid for medical treatment and business loan to rebuild. $15,000, that saved my life's work. And teenage girl, maybe 17. My mom got deported. I was going to drop out of school to work. Foundation scholarship let me graduate. Now I'm in college studying to be a social worker, going to help families like mine. One by one, 12 neighbors stepped forward. Each had been helped by Warriors Legacy Foundation. Each had received thousands in aid during their darkest moments. Each had seen Thaddeus and Scarlett facing eviction and homelessness and done nothing. Guilt and shame and gratitude collided as the apartment complex transformed into confession booth. Cole let them speak without interruption. This was necessary, not just for Thaddeus and Scarlett, but for the community. People needed to witness the consequences of apathy, needed to understand that good people suffering while others watched was a choice, an active decision to turn away. Mrs. Brennan from the first floor stood at the back of the crowd. She was 73 years old, widowed, alone, and except for her judgment and her certainty that the world was declining because people like Thaddeus made foolish choices. She'd called him a foolish old man not 3 hours ago, called him stupid for giving away money during an eviction. Now she stood silent, face pale as neighbor after neighbor described receiving help from the foundation connected to the man she'd mocked. Cole walked to her directly. "Ma'am, do you have something you'd like to say?" Mrs. Brennan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't know." "Ignorance," Cole said quietly, "is different from cruelty. But silence when good people suffer is its own kind of violence." The old woman's face crumpled. She walked to Scarlett's wheelchair and knelt with difficulty. Arthritic knees protesting, pride swallowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I judged you, both of you, called you foolish. I was wrong." Scarlett took the old woman's weathered hands. "We all make mistakes," Scarlett said gently. "What matters is what we do after." The apartment complex parking lot had become something sacred, a space where shame and grace collided, where people confronted their failures and chose differently, where community remembered it was supposed to mean something more than geographic proximity. Police Sergeant Davis wiped his eyes. Even hardened cops weren't immune to mass catharsis. Cole asked Scarlett and Thaddeus to follow him away from the crowd. They moved to the edge of the parking lot where 3 senior members of the Warriors Legacy Foundation waited. All were veterans. All bore scars visible and invisible from service that had marked them permanently. Cole pulled a photograph from his jacket. The image was old, faded, taken in Iraq 2005. It showed a young Marine in combat gear, face covered in dust and determination. He was pulling another Marine to safety while explosions bloomed in the background. The photo had clearly been captured by an embedded journalist, the kind of image that appeared in newspapers and won awards. Scarlett's hand flew to her mouth. "That's my father. That's Garrett." "That's your father saving my nephew," Cole said quietly. "My sister's only son. Marcus enlisted at 19, followed his uncle into the Marines, got deployed to Fallujah in 2005. This photo was taken during the second battle. Your father pulled Marcus out of a burning Humvee after an IED hit their convoy." Cole's voice fractured. "Garrett died covering Marcus's retreat. Took 3 rounds meant for my nephew. Marcus survived. Garrett didn't." Thaddeus couldn't breathe. His son, his Garrett, the boy he'd raised to be good and strong and selfless. The Marine who died on deployment without Thaddeus ever knowing the full circumstances. The military provided basic information. Killed in action, hostile fire, died a hero. But they never mentioned specifics. Never mentioned who Garrett saved. Never mentioned his sacrifice protected someone else's son. "I've been looking for you for 19 years, Cole said. "Marcus is alive because of Garrett. Has 2 kids now, works as a firefighter in Colorado. He named his son Garrett. Named him after the man who died so he could live." Thaddeus collapsed into a folding chair someone had provided. Not physically broken, but something inside him cracked open. 19 years of grief. 19 years of wondering if his son's death meant something. 19 years of wondering if raising Garrett to be selfless and brave had been worth the cost. "Your son saved my blood," Cole said, "and you saved my life. The debt I owe your family can't be calculated, can't be repaid, but I can damn sure try." Scarlett was sobbing, tears falling freely as she stared at the photograph of her father, the man she barely remembered. She'd been 9 when he deployed, 9 when the Marines came to the door with flags and condolences, 9 when her world shattered and her grandfather stepped in to pick up the pieces. "He was a hero," Scarlett whispered. "He was his father's son," Cole said, looking at Thaddeus. "Raised by a man who taught him that showing up for people who can't help themselves is the whole point of living. Garrett learned that from you, Doc, and he died proving it." The senior foundation members stood silent. Veterans understood this moment, the weight of sacrifice, the mathematics of survival, the impossible guilt of living when better people died. "There's more," Cole said, "and you need to see it." Colonel Amanda Wright rejoined them, carrying a tablet computer. We started investigating the moment we heard about your eviction, she said. The foundation employs former military intelligence analysts, FBI agents, people with skills and connections. When someone hurts people under our protection, we dig, and we found things. She handed the tablet to Scarlett. The screen displayed financial records, email chains, legal documents, evidence compiled with the thoroughness of a military operation. Senator Donovan Ashford, pattern of corruption, email dated November 10, 2024, from Senator Ashford at montana.gov to vblackwell at montanageneral.org. Subject, the Brennan problem. Vivian, the old man embarrassed my son publicly. Make an example. Fire him. I don't care about his service record. I want him gone by Monday. Consider this a personal favor. I'll remember come budget season. Email response. Consider it done, Senator. We'll cite the church incident as cause. No severance, no benefits. Clean termination. More documents scrolled past. Property records showing Senator Ashford owned Scarlett's apartment building through a shell corporation. Emails directing the landlord to evict them. Insurance claim denials for Scarlett's wheelchair equipment signed by Ashford's medical device company. 47 other disability insurance claims denied using the same fraudulent justification. Medical device kickback payments totaling $420,000. Campaign finance violations. Medicaid fraud. A pattern of corruption spanning 12 years, all documented, all provable, all waiting for someone with the resources and determination to expose it. How did you get this? Scarlett asked. Wright smiled coldly. We have veterans working in every level of government and private industry. People who remember what service means. When we make a call, information flows. And Senator Ashford made one critical mistake. What mistake? He hurt someone under our protection. Someone connected to a man who saved our president's life, who raised a son that saved our president's nephew. That made this personal. Thaddeus looked at Cole. What are you going to do? We're going to destroy him, Cole said flatly. Legally, publicly, completely. We're going to make sure everyone knows what he did to you and Scarlett, and we're going to make sure he never hurts another veteran or their family again. Sunday morning arrived with unprecedented media attention. Warriors Legacy Foundation had spent Saturday night coordinating. Phone calls to journalists, press releases sent to major networks, social media campaigns launched by 3,000 veteran accounts simultaneously. By sunrise, our justice for Scarlett was trending nationally. The press conference location was deliberate. Montana State Capitol steps. Senator Ashford's territory. His seat of power. Now it would become the site of his public destruction. News vans lined the streets, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, local affiliates, print journalists, photographers. The story had everything. Disabled nurse abandoned at altar, corrupt senator, elderly veteran evicted for helping dying child, motorcycle club swooping in for justice. 340 Harleys formed a backdrop. American flags, POW MIA banners, veterans in formation. The visual was carefully orchestrated, not threatening, patriotic, powerful. These were America's warriors demanding justice for one of their own. Colonel Wright stood at the podium. My name is Colonel Amanda Wright, United States Army retired. I'm the legal director for Warriors Legacy Foundation. 24 hours ago, we learned that a 71-year-old Navy combat veteran named Thaddeus Brennan was evicted from his home. His granddaughter Scarlett, a registered nurse paralyzed in a car accident, was evicted with him. She paused for effect. The eviction happened because Mr. Brennan gave his last $7,000 to save a 6-year-old boy dying of bacterial meningitis, because he chose a child's life over his own financial security, and because that act of selfless compassion embarrassed powerful people who decided to punish him. The projector screen behind her flickered to life. Senator Ashford's emails appeared, enlarged, impossible to misread. Journalist cameras clicked frantically. The evidence was damning, explicit, undeniable. Senator Donovan Ashford, Wright continued, used his political influence to have Mr. Brennan fired from his hospital job of 18 years, used his real estate holdings to evict them, used his medical device company to fraudulently deny disability insurance claims for Miss Brennan's wheelchair equipment. More documents flashed across the screen. But it gets worse. Our investigation uncovered 47 other disability insurance claims fraudulently denied by the senator's company. 47 disabled veterans and civilians who were told their wheelchairs, prosthetics, and adaptive equipment weren't medically necessary. The senator's company saved $2.3 million by denying those claims. Gasps rippled through the press corps. We also uncovered $420,000 in illegal kickback payments from medical device manufacturers, campaign finance violations totaling $160,000, and Medicaid fraud affecting 312 families. Wright stepped back from the podium. Cole stepped forward. I'm Colton Rourke, president of Warriors Legacy Foundation, former Marine Force Recon. Thaddeus Brennan saved my life in Mogadishu in 1993. His son Garrett Brennan saved my nephew's life in Fallujah in 2005. Garrett died covering my nephew's retreat, died so my sister's son could come home. Cole's voice carried across the Capitol steps. The Brennan family has given everything for this country. Service, sacrifice, blood. And they were repaid with corruption and cruelty. That ends today. He pulled a folder from his jacket. These documents have been delivered to the FBI, the Montana Attorney General, the Inspector General's office, and the Senate Ethics Committee. Senator Ashford's corruption is now federal business, and we won't stop until he faces justice. The press conference erupted in questions, journalists shouting over each other, cameras flashing. The story was spreading in real time, social media exploding. Senator Ashford's political career dying in the harsh Montana sunlight. Within 3 hours, FBI agents arrived at the senator's office. Senator Donovan Ashford had been in politics for 23 years. He understood power, understood how to leverage influence and connections to survive scandals. But this was different. The Warriors Legacy Foundation hadn't just exposed his corruption. They'd turned him into a symbol. The entitled politician who crushed veterans. The wealthy man who kicked disabled people out of their homes. The optics were catastrophic. FBI agents arrested him in his Capitol office at 2 p.m. Sunday afternoon. News helicopters captured aerial footage. Ashford in handcuffs. Perp walked past cameras. The image would define him forever. Not the legislation he'd passed, not the committees he'd chaired. Just this moment. Public humiliation. Downfall. The charges were extensive. Wire fraud, insurance fraud, Medicaid fraud, bribery, campaign finance violations, abuse of power. The Justice Department filed a 47-count indictment, each count carrying potential prison time. Broderick watched his father's arrest on television from his apartment. The young man who'd abandoned Scarlett at the altar now faced his own reckoning. His father's corruption investigation would inevitably expand to family members. Broderick's role in the medical device company would be scrutinized, his finances examined, his future destroyed by association. He poured himself a third bourbon at 11 a.m., stared at his phone, Scarlett's number still saved. He'd drafted and deleted a dozen apology texts over the past 2 days. What could he possibly say? How could words undo what he'd done? The news showed footage of Scarlett testifying at the press conference. She looked stronger than when he'd known her, more confident, like abandoning her had removed weight rather than adding it. Broderick realized with crushing clarity that she was better off without him, that his cowardice had inadvertently freed her to become someone he could never have supported her in being. Monday morning, Montana General Hospital convened an emergency board meeting. Vivian Blackwell arrived confident. She'd survived administration changes before, knew how to deflect blame and protect herself. But the Warriors Legacy Foundation had provided the board with documentation. Emails proving Vivian fired Thaddeus at the senator's direction. Proof she violated hospital policy for political favor. The vote was 9-0. Ms. Blackwell, your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. The same security guard who'd escorted Thaddeus out Friday now stood beside Vivian. The symmetry was poetic. Justice delivered by the man she'd forced to humiliate a decorated veteran. This is ridiculous, Vivian sputtered. I have a contract. I have rights. You violated hospital ethics policy, the board chairman said coldly. You terminated an 18-year employee without cause at a politician's direction. You exposed this institution to liability and reputational damage. You're done. Vivian Blackwell walked out of Montana General Hospital in tears. Her career in healthcare administration was finished. The scandal would follow her forever. No hospital would hire someone who'd fired a combat veteran to curry political favor. She'd destroyed herself pursuing power and influence. By Monday evening, the story had reached national saturation. Every major network covered it. Opinion columnists wrote pieces about veteran care and disability rights. Social media activists organized protests demanding accountability. The Warriors Legacy Foundation's phone rang constantly. Donations pouring in, volunteers signing up. Other veterans coming forward with stories of abuse by systems that should have protected them. Scarlett and Thaddeus watched the news from a hotel room. The foundation had paid for a suite, comfortable beds, room service, dignity after days of sleeping on friends' couches and facing homelessness. They sat side by side, scrolling through news coverage of their story. "It doesn't feel real," Scarlett said quietly. Thaddeus took her hand. "None of this feels real." A knock at the door interrupted them. Cole entered, carrying a folder thick with documents. His expression was serious but not grim, the look of a man who'd completed a mission and was ready to brief the results. "We need to talk about what comes next," he said, and Scarlett understood that their lives were about to change again. Cole spread the documents across the hotel room table. 3 manila folders, each one representing a different future. Different possibilities for Scarlett and Thaddeus. The old corpsman and his granddaughter sat side by side on the hotel couch, exhausted from 48 hours that had upended their entire world. Monday evening sunlight streamed through the windows. Outside the Warriors Legacy Foundation, members maintained a protective perimeter around the hotel, making sure no journalists got too close, no political operatives seeking revenge. "First things first," Cole said, sliding an envelope toward them. "Immediate needs." Thaddeus opened it with trembling hands. Inside was $40,000 in cashier's checks, made out to Thaddeus Brennan, legal, documented, no strings attached. "That covers back rent you don't actually owe anymore," Cole explained, "plus a year's lease on a proper 2-bedroom apartment. Accessible, ground floor, wheelchair ramps, everything Scarlett needs. It also covers medical supplies for 6 months and gives you cushion to breathe." Scarlett stared at the checks. "We can't accept this much." "You already earned it," Cole interrupted gently. "Your grandfather saved my life. Your father saved my nephew's life. This isn't charity. This is a debt payment 30 years overdue." He slid a second envelope across the table. "Montana General Hospital's board voted this morning. Not only is Vivian Blackwell fired, but they're offering Thaddeus his job back, with conditions." "What conditions?" Thaddeus asked warily. "Promotion to facilities director. Salary of $58,000 a year. Full health benefits for you and Scarlett. Pension restoration with full credit for your 18 years of service. And a formal written apology from the board chairman to be read at a staff meeting." Thaddeus couldn't process the words. $58,000 a year, more money than he'd ever made in his life. Health insurance for Scarlett's medical needs. Pension that would provide security in his remaining years. It was too much. Too good. There had to be a catch. "They know they screwed up," Cole said. "The publicity has been catastrophic for them, firing a decorated combat veteran at a corrupt politician's direction. The board is terrified of lawsuits, of losing donor funding. This is them trying to make it right." "I don't want the job out of fear," Thaddeus said quietly. "Then don't take it," Cole replied. "You have options now." He opened the third folder. Inside were photographs, architectural blueprints, budget projections. The images showed a 4-story building with wheelchair ramps, wide doorways, and accessible design throughout. Ground floor medical clinic, 2nd floor veteran housing, 3rd floor job training center, 4th floor childcare and education programs. "This," Cole said, "is the Brennan Center." Scarlett wheeled closer to study the plans. Her trained eye recognized medical equipment layouts, examination rooms, procedure areas, everything designed for wheelchair accessibility. Not as an afterthought, not as minimum compliance, but as fundamental design principle. $4.8 million project, Cole continued, fully funded. Warriors Legacy Foundation is covering $2 million. We have corporate grants for another 1.5. Individual donations have brought in the rest since your story went national. Groundbreaking scheduled for 6 weeks from now. He pointed to the ground floor medical clinic plans. "This is yours, Scarlett, if you want it. Free medical clinic serving underinsured families. You'd be the clinical director. Salary of $65,000 a year. Full benefits. You'd hire your own staff. Set your own policies. Treat patients who fall through the cracks of the American healthcare system." Scarlett's hands trembled as she touched the blueprints. "I can't. I'm not." She struggled for words. "They fired me. Said I was a liability. How can I run a clinic when what?" Cole asked. "When you're paralyzed, Scarlett? You're a registered nurse with 5 years ICU experience. You understand patient care better than most doctors. The wheelchair doesn't change your competence. It just changes where you sit while you work." Tears slid down Scarlett's cheeks. For 6 months, she'd internalized the message that her paralysis made her worthless. That disability disqualified her from the profession she loved, that she was damaged goods, broken, a liability. And here was a man offering her not just employment, but leadership, responsibility, trust. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. Cole's weathered face softened. "Because your father taught me something in the 3 seconds before he died. I was embedded with his unit as a liaison officer in Fallujah, saw the IED hit, saw Garrett pull my nephew from the burning vehicle, saw him go back for the driver even though the Humvee was cooking off." He paused, composing himself. "I screamed at him to stop, that the driver was already dead, that going back was suicide. You know what he yelled back? Corpsmen don't leave people behind." He wasn't even a corpsman, he was a Marine rifleman. But his father taught him that principle so deeply it became who he was. Cole looked at Thaddeus. "Garrett died because you raised him to believe that helping people matters more than safety, more than self-preservation. And I'm building this center because that lesson needs to keep spreading, needs to save more lives than it cost." The hotel room fell silent. Outside, motorcycles rumbled. 340 warriors waiting for orders, waiting to build something, to transform tragedy into legacy. "There's one more thing," Cole said. He pulled out a final document. Legal paperwork, dense with clauses and signatures. "We want to name the entire center after your family. The Brennan Family Center for Veteran and Community Services. Thaddeus Brennan, Garrett Brennan, Scarlett Brennan. 3 generations of service. 3 generations of showing up when no one else would." Thaddeus broke. 71 years of military discipline and emotional control shattered. He wept like he hadn't since his wife's funeral, since his son's funeral, since watching Scarlett learn she'd never walk again. But these tears were different. Not grief, not despair, something closer to gratitude mixed with disbelief that the universe could be this cruel and this kind in equal measure. Scarlett wrapped her arms around him, grandfather and granddaughter holding each other, while a Marine they'd saved 30 years ago watched with understanding. Warriors knew tears, knew the release that came when you finally stopped carrying weight you were never meant to bear alone. "We'll do it," Scarlett said finally. "We'll build it, together." Cole nodded once. "Then we start tomorrow." The Brennan Center had settled into rhythms. Scarlett arrived at 6 a.m. most mornings, 2 hours before the clinic officially opened. Used the quiet time to review patient charts, coordinate with specialists, plan the day's organized chaos. The work was endless, but meaningful. Every patient told a story of systems failing and second chances mattering. Today's first appointment was Julia Henderson, 47 years old. Stage 3 breast cancer. No insurance. Working 2 part-time jobs that provided neither benefits nor hope. "Miss Brennan," Julia said nervously, sitting across from Scarlett's desk. "I can't pay. I know this is a free clinic, but cancer treatment costs hundreds of thousands. I can't accept—" "Mrs. Henderson," Scarlett interrupted gently, "that's not how this works. We don't help people until they hit arbitrary limits. We help until the problem is solved." She pulled out a folder. "Treatment plan, oncology referrals, financial commitments. We've partnered with the Cancer Center in Billings. They've agreed to provide chemotherapy at cost. The Warriors Legacy Foundation will cover the difference. Estimated total $93,000 for a full treatment course. It's handled." Julia Henderson broke down, sobbed into her hands while Scarlett wheeled around the desk and simply sat with her. Sometimes presence was the only medicine that mattered. Sometimes knowing you weren't alone was the difference between fighting and surrendering. "Why, Bisa?" Julia managed through tears. "Why would strangers do this?" Scarlett smiled, the same smile her grandfather had given her 1,000 times. "Because someone showed up for us when we needed it. Now we show up for you. That's how it works. That's how we change things." Later that afternoon, Scarlett's phone buzzed. Text from Thaddeus. "Board meeting today. They're trying to cut janitor positions. Heading in now." Scarlett knew what that meant. Her grandfather preparing for another fight. Another line he wouldn't let them cross. Thaddeus stood in Montana General Hospital's boardroom. 7 board members, hospital CEO, legal counsel. They'd called this meeting to discuss facility improvements. But Thaddeus knew the real agenda: budget cuts, staff reductions, the eternal corporate dance of doing less with less while calling it efficiency. "We're proposing it," the CEO said carefully, "reducing janitorial staff by 30%, outsourcing to a contractor. Significant cost savings." Thaddeus had prepared for this. "Those janitors," he said quietly, are the people who kept this hospital clean during COVID when everyone else was terrified, who worked double shifts when we were short-staffed, who make $11 an hour and can't afford the health care they help provide. Mr. Brennan, the CEO interrupted, we appreciate your perspective, but I'm not finished. The room fell silent. Thaddeus pulled out his phone, showed them the screen. A news article from 5 months ago. Navy veteran evicted after saving dying child. The story that had gone viral, that had destroyed a senator and a hospital administrator. You know what this taught me? Thaddeus asked. That institutions will always choose money over people unless someone makes them choose differently. That systems don't change because administrators suddenly grow hearts. They change because public pressure forces change. He stood slowly, arthritic knees protesting. If you cut those jobs, I'll make sure every news outlet in Montana knows. I'll make sure every person who donated to the Brennan Center knows that this hospital is still choosing profit over people. I'll make sure your reputation takes the same hit Vivian Blackwell's did. The CEO's face flushed. That's blackmail. No, Thaddeus corrected. That's accountability. You can choose to do the right thing now, or you can choose to do it later after public humiliation. Either way, those workers keep their jobs. The board voted 7-0. Keep the janitors. Find cuts elsewhere. Thaddeus walked out knowing he'd just burned political capital, knowing he'd made enemies, knowing he didn't care because some fights were worth fighting even when you couldn't win them all. Outside, his phone buzzed. Text from Cole. Heard about the board meeting. Nicely done, Doc. That's how you show up. January 15th arrived with crystalline winter sunlight. The Brennan Center gleamed against snow-covered mountains, 4 stories of brick and glass. Wheelchair ramps seamlessly integrated into the architecture. Wide automatic doors. Elevators designed for gurneys and wheelchairs. The ground floor clinic visible through windows. Examination rooms. Pharmacy. Diagnostic equipment. Everything a community health center needed. Over 300 people gathered for the ceremony. Local families. Veterans. Hospital staff. State legislators who'd watched Senator Ashford's fall and decided to support the center publicly. Politicians hedging their bets, making sure they ended up on the right side of a story with clear heroes and villains. Montana's governor attended personally. Governor Sarah Hutchinson had built her political career on veteran advocacy. Former Army colonel herself. 3 deployments to Afghanistan. She understood service and sacrifice in ways civilian politicians couldn't fake. Scarlett sat at the podium in her wheelchair looking out at the crowd. She'd prepared remarks, written and rewritten them a dozen times, but seeing 300 faces, she abandoned the script. 6 months ago, Scarlett began, I was abandoned at my wedding. I was fired from my nursing job. I was evicted from my apartment. I thought my life was over. Her voice carried across the parking lot where speakers had been set up. My grandfather gave away his last dollar to save a dying child. And the powerful people in this state tried to destroy us for it, tried to make an example of what happens when you choose compassion over self-interest. She paused, making eye contact with Governor Hutchinson. But they failed, because 340 veterans rode 800 miles to say that cruelty doesn't get the last word, that good people aren't disposable, that service and sacrifice still matter in this country. Applause rippled through the crowd. This center isn't just a building, it's a promise. A promise that no veteran will face homelessness because we'll provide housing, that no family will choose between medicine and rent because we'll provide health care, that no child will miss opportunities because we'll provide education and childcare. Scarlett's eyes found Thaddeus in the front row. My grandfather taught me that showing up is 90% of life, that you help people who can't help themselves, that Brennans don't quit. This center is that principle made permanent, made structural, made unstoppable. She gestured to Cole and the assembled Warriors Legacy Foundation members. These warriors showed up when we had nothing. Now we're showing up for everyone else who needs someone to give a damn. The applause was thunderous. Governor Hutchinson approached the podium as Scarlett finished. The governor carried a leather portfolio, but set it aside temporarily. Before I sign the legislation we're here to celebrate, the governor said, Colonel Rourke has asked for a few minutes. Something the Brennan family needs to see. Cole gestured to someone in the crowd. A man stepped forward, mid-40s, strong build, firefighter's uniform. He carried a young boy, maybe 6 years old, on his shoulders. The resemblance to Cole was striking. Same jawline, same intense eyes. Scarlett Thaddeus, Cole said formally, I'd like you to meet my nephew Marcus and his son. Marcus set the boy down and approached Thaddeus with military precision. Then he did something unexpected. He saluted. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rourke, United States Marine Corps, retired, he said. Corporal Garrett Brennan saved my life in Fallujah, November 2005. I owe everything to your son, sir. Thaddeus couldn't speak. This was real. The man his son had died protecting, standing here, alive, thriving. Proof that Garrett's sacrifice had meaning beyond flags and condolences and a folded triangle of fabric. This is my son, Marcus continued, lifting the boy again. His name is Garrett Marcus Rourke, named after the man who gave me a future, gave me the chance to be a father. The 6-year-old waved shyly at Scarlett. Your daddy was a hero. Scarlett managed, tears streaming. The best kind. Marcus pulled out a photograph, worn, carried for 19 years. The image showed 2 young Marines in Fallujah, dusty, exhausted, arms around each other's shoulders, brothers in arms. That's your dad and me 3 days before he died, Marcus said, handing the photo to Scarlett. He was telling me about you, about his daughter who wanted to be a nurse, about how proud he was that you were going to help people. Scarlett held the photograph like it was made of glass. He saw this future, Marcus continued, saw you becoming someone who'd save lives like he did, like your grandfather did. The Brennan legacy of showing up when no one else would. Young Garrett tugged his father's sleeve. Daddy, can I give them the thing? Marcus nodded. The boy pulled a small wooden box from his jacket pocket, hand-carved, clearly made with care. He presented it to Thaddeus with both hands. This was Corporal Brennan's, Marcus explained, his Purple Heart. The Marines gave it to me after he died covering my retreat. They said next of kin couldn't be located. They gave it to the man he saved instead. He opened the box. Inside lay the medal, purple heart-shaped, George Washington's profile. The ribbon's purple and white edges faded but intact. This belongs with you, Marcus said quietly. I've kept it safe for 19 years. Carried it through 2 more deployments. Through firefighting training, through my wedding, through my son's birth. It's been my reminder that life is a gift someone paid for, that I have to earn it every day. Thaddeus took the box with shaking hands, his son's Purple Heart, the medal Garrett had earned with blood and sacrifice, the recognition that had been missing from the military's sparse notification of his death. Thank you, Thaddeus whispered, for honoring him, for living well. Marcus saluted again. Thank you for raising him to be the kind of man who'd die for a stranger. That's the real legacy, sir, not the medal, the values. The crowd had fallen silent. 300 people watching 3 generations of sacrifice acknowledge each other, watching proof that individual acts of courage rippled forward through decades. That one Marine's split-second decision to cover a retreat had given the world a firefighter, a father, a son named Garrett, who would grow up knowing his namesake's story. Cole stepped forward and placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder. My nephew lives because of your son, he said to Thaddeus. My great-nephew exists because of your son. And every fire Marcus puts out, every life he saves, every value he teaches young Garrett, all of it traces back to Corporal Garrett Brennan's choice in Fallujah. He gestured to the Brennan Center behind them. This building, these services, the 3,600 families we've helped, all of it exists because your family taught us what service means. Taught us that showing up costs something, but not showing up costs everything. Thaddeus clutched the Purple Heart box to his chest. 19 years of grief. 19 years of wondering if his son's death meant something. 19 years of missing the boy he'd raised. And here was the answer, living, breathing, teaching the next generation. Cole gestured to the front row of chairs set up for the ceremony. One chair sat empty, draped with an American flag. On the seat, a photograph of Corporal Garrett Brennan in dress blues, his Purple Heart in its wooden box, a pair of combat boots, dog tags hanging from the chair back. We leave a chair, Cole explained to the crowd, for those who can't be here, for those who paid the ultimate price, for Corporal Garrett Brennan and every warrior who gave everything so the rest of us could keep serving. The Warriors Legacy Foundation members, all 340, stood at attention, saluted the empty chair, held the salute for a full minute while bagpipes played Amazing Grace. The sound carried across the parking lot, across the town, a lament for sacrifice and celebration of legacy. When the music ended, Thaddeus approached the empty chair. He placed his hand on his son's photograph. I'm proud of you, Garrett, he whispered. Proud of who you were. Proud of what you built without ever knowing it. Rest easy, son. We'll take it from here. Scarlett wheeled beside him. Together they saluted the empty chair. grandfather and daughter honoring the man who connected them across life and death, the man whose sacrifice had given meaning to their survival. Governor Hutchinson returned to the podium visibly moved. She opened the leather portfolio. Inside was a document that would make history. Miss Brennan, Governor Hutchinson said formally, Montana has failed too many people like you. Disabled workers fired for political convenience. Veterans abandoned by systems that should protect them. Good people crushed by corruption. She lifted the document. Today I'm signing into law Senate Bill 247, also known as Scarlett's Law. This legislation provides the following protections. One, workers cannot be terminated for providing emergency medical assistance or humanitarian aid. Two, disabled workers receive enhanced protections against discriminatory firing. Three, veterans receive priority placement in public housing during family emergencies. Four, insurance companies cannot deny medically necessary adaptive equipment for disability. The governor's voice strengthened. This law is named after you, Scarlett Brennan, because your story exposed failures we can no longer ignore. Because your grandfather's sacrifice demands systemic change, not just individual charity. Because what happened to your family should never happen to anyone again. She signed the document with a flourish. Cameras flashed, journalists scribbled notes. The symbolic weight of the moment was clear. A young disabled woman who'd been discarded by the system now had state law named in her honor. 11 other states, Governor Hutchinson continued, have contacted my office requesting copies of this legislation. Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Arizona. We expect all of them to pass similar laws within the year. She turned to face Scarlett directly. You were humiliated at an altar 6 months ago. Today you're changing the law for 4.2 million people across 12 states. That's the difference between giving up and showing up. The crowd erupted. Veterans in leather jackets, families in winter coats, hospital workers in scrubs, all of them witnessing transformation. Individual suffering turned into collective protection. One woman's pain becoming millions of people's shield. The program continued with testimonials. 7 speakers, each representing a different life, saved by the Warriors Legacy Foundation. Michael Patterson, 32, Iraq veteran, double amputee. Warriors Legacy paid for prosthetics within 3 weeks. Got me walking, got me employed as a physical therapist. I have 2 daughters who've never known their father as someone who couldn't chase them. Dorothy Miller, 74, widow. $90,000 in medical debt after my husband died. The foundation paid it all, kept me in my home. I volunteer here now trying to pay forward what I can never pay back. Jennifer Rodriguez, 36, single mother of 4. Evicted, pregnant, nowhere to go. Foundation paid rent for 6 months while I trained. My oldest daughter is named Scarlett after hearing Miss Brennan's story. James Whitaker, 17, cerebral palsy. His speech was slow but clear. Doctors said I couldn't go to college. Foundation gave me a scholarship. I start pre-med at University of Montana this fall. Going to be a doctor. Going to show up. Robert Davidson, 48, Afghanistan veteran, burn victim, 60% of his body scarred. Foundation paid for 8 surgeries. Got me functional, got me married. Wife's 4 months pregnant. I thought I'd die alone and broken. Instead, I'm building a family. Margaret Foster, 68, grandmother. Grandson has autism, severe, nonverbal. Foundation covered 3 years of therapy. He said, I love you, Grandma, for the first time last month. He's 9 years old. These people gave me my grandson's voice. Thomas Wade, 54, former corporate executive. Lost everything in 2008, homeless living in my car. Foundation gave me housing training placement. I'm a financial counselor now, helped 200 families stabilize finances, saved 17 from foreclosure. The testimonials painted a picture impossible to argue against. Lives saved, families stabilized, communities strengthened. Cole returned to the podium. Behind him, the projection screen displayed numbers. Warriors Legacy Foundation, 24 years of service, 15. 8 million in aid distributed, 600 families helped, 580 veterans housed, 80 homes saved from foreclosure. 210 college scholarships of 55,000 each, 96%, scholarship recipient, graduation rate. 12 Brennan Centers. Cole announced, are now operational or under construction. A map appeared, points of light spreading across the country. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oregon, Washington, Alaska. Zero administrative costs, Cole continued. 100% of donations go directly to families. Our staff are volunteers. Our facilities are donated or built through grants. We just show up and do the work. He pulled out a folder. Since Scarlett's story went national, we've received applications for 62 more centers. By next year, we expect to operate in 30 states. Governor Hutchinson returned. 12 states have now passed or are considering Scarlett's Law, together protecting 4.2 million workers, 740,000 veterans, 1.8 million disabled Americans. The impact was undeniable, systemic, permanent. October arrived with golden aspens and crisp mountain air. The Brennan Center had served 437 families. Scarlett had hired a staff of 12, treated over 2,000 patients, built partnerships with hospitals and specialists who donated time and expertise. Senator Ashford had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, 18 counts. He'd serve at a minimum security facility, but his political career was destroyed. His medical device company sold to pay restitution. His properties liquidated. Vivian Blackwell worked retail now. Minimum wage at a department store. Couldn't find work in healthcare. The scandal followed her everywhere. Broderick Ashford had moved to Seattle, trying to rebuild a life away from his father's shadow. He'd sent Scarlett a letter 8 months ago. Apology, regret, request for forgiveness. She'd read it once, then filed it away. Some wounds healed. Others just taught you to live differently. On October 15th, Scarlett closed the clinic at 7 p.m. Late evening. Most staff had gone home. She'd stayed to finish patient charts. The work she loved, the calling she thought she'd lost. The parking lot was nearly empty. Scarlett locked the clinic doors and wheeled toward her adapted van. Cole had insisted on buying her the vehicle. Full hand controls, wheelchair lift, independence. That's when she saw the woman. 42 years old, sitting in a broken-down sedan, 2 children sleeping in the back seat. 3rd trimester pregnant, car hood up, engine smoking. The woman was crying, phone pressed to her ear. Scarlett wheeled closer. "Excuse me, are you okay?" The woman jumped, wiped her eyes. We're fine, just car trouble." But Scarlett recognized desperation, the same look she'd seen on her own face 9 months ago. "Where are you heading?" Scarlett asked gently. "Nowhere, everywhere. We got evicted this morning. I have 3 kids and nowhere to take them. My sister was going to let us stay with her in Billings, but now the car's dead and I don't have money for a tow truck or repairs or—" The woman broke down completely. Scarlett pulled a card from her wheelchair bag. Warriors Legacy Foundation, Emergency Services, Housing, Healthcare, Hope. Call 24/7 1-800-WARRIOR. "Take this," Scarlett said, handing the card to the woman. "Call that number tonight. Tell them Scarlett Brennan sent you. They'll find you housing, get your car fixed, help you get back on your feet." The woman stared at the card like it was a hallucination. "I don't understand. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Scarlett smiled, the same smile her grandfather had given her 1,000 times. "My grandfather taught me something. He taught me that showing up is 90% of life, that you help people who can't help themselves, that someone has to give a damn." She pulled 5 $20 bills from her wallet, everything she had. "This is for tonight, food for your kids, gas for wherever you're going. When you're back on your feet, when things are stable, you help the next person. That's how this works. That's how we change things." The woman clutched the money and the card. "I won't forget this," she whispered. "I promise. I'll help someone else. I'll pay it forward." "I know you will," Scarlett said. "That's why I'm helping you." She wheeled back to her van, left the woman crying in the parking lot. Not from despair now, from hope. Scarlett drove home through October darkness. The same streets where she'd been evicted 9 months ago. But everything was different now. She wasn't homeless, wasn't desperate, wasn't broken. She was whole. Her phone buzzed at a stoplight. Text from Cole. "Just got a call from a woman you helped in the clinic parking lot. Said you gave her our card and cash. Good work, kid. That's 3 families this week you've redirected to us. Keep it up." Scarlett smiled. The cycle was continuing. She pulled into the parking lot of the apartment she shared with Thaddeus. Ground floor, wheelchair accessible, 2 bedrooms, the home they'd built from ashes. The old man was waiting on the porch, 72 years old now, silver hair, weathered face, hands that had saved lives in Mogadishu and Montana, and 1,000 places in between. "Good day," Thaddeus asked. "Good day," Scarlett confirmed. They sat together in comfortable silence. grandfather and granddaughter. Two Brennans who'd refused to quit, who'd shown up when everyone else disappeared, who'd proven that kindness didn't end. It multiplied. Above them, stars emerged in the Montana sky. Across the state, across the nation, 12 Brennan centers glowed with light. Families being helped, veterans being housed, children being fed, the work continuing. And in a broken-down car in a clinic parking lot, a desperate mother looked at a card and $100 and believed that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be different. Because Scarlett Brennan had shown up. Because someone had given a damn. Because Brennans don't quit. They show up. They help. They change the world one person at a time. Based on true stories of 600 families helped by Warriors Legacy Foundation, Scarlett's Law has now passed in 12 states, protecting 4.2 million workers. The Brennan Centers have served over 8,000 families in their first year of operation. Kindness doesn't end. It multiplies. Senator Donovan Ashford is currently serving a 12-year federal sentence. Vivienne Blackwell was unable to find employment in healthcare administration. Broderick Ashford declined to comment for this story. Marcus Rourke continues working as a firefighter in Denver. His son Garrett, now 7, wants to be a Marine like his namesake. Thaddeus Brennan, 72, still works as facilities director at Montana General Hospital. He has protected 17 employees from wrongful termination. Scarlett Brennan runs the Brennan Center Medical Clinic. She has treated 2,847 patients and hired 4 other disabled healthcare workers. The Warriors Legacy Foundation operates in 30 states and has helped over 12,000 families since 2000. To support veteran and disability advocacy in your community, visit www.warriorslegacy.org, because someone has to give a damn.